Hi everyone. This short video will introduce you to process mapping, a management tool used to visually depict the flow of work and the steps and people involved in a process. Let's get started. In this video, we will discuss the purpose and value of process mapping and review some general steps for mapping a clinical or operational process. Okay, purpose and value. Process mapping can uncover inefficiencies, streamline your workflows, improve outcomes, making it a powerful tool for any process improvement project. It can transform complex workflows into clear visual representations and bring everyone onto the same page, which can foster transparency. Mapping out each step helps pinpoint unnecessary tasks or waste, rework loops, and redundant activities. Process maps serve as excellent training materials for new team members and provide a clear reference point for everyone involved. This standardization ensures consistency and reduces error rates. Process maps provide a baseline for measuring progress and tracking the improvement of continuous improvement initiatives. And then finally, the active mapping processes itself encourages a focus on quality and continuous improvement, critical thinking and problem solving, and it can help to lead to a more proactive and quality conscious culture. All right, so let's talk about the steps of process mapping. Actually, before we go there, let's just define what a process is. A process is simply a series of steps that are designed to produce an outcome. It's also a diagram with symbols to summarize the main process components. You can have a current state map and then also a future state map. A current state map is a map that shows the process as it's currently organized. They're helpful for identifying gaps and improvement areas. You can also create a future state map, which is a map that shows how the process can look in the future or in some kind of ideal situation. So perhaps we want to create a new process. The future state map would help us imagine what it looks like. Here is one template. There are several different templates. This is a pretty basic one. You can see the flow moving from left to right. You can see that there are decision points, the diamond-shaped steps, and then you can see that yes or no will determine the next step. There are templates out there that have a number of different symbols. This one is one of the more basic ones. Okay, and then here, this example is showing a 7-day follow-up process for psychiatric patient discharges. You can see a beginning and an end. Those are the oval-shaped terminals. They're colored pink. And then the diamond shapes show a decision point with a yes or a no direction arrow. The blue rectangles show actions or activities, sometimes with a specific role or position. Process maps can be as detailed as you want. They should include as much detail as is useful for your team. Okay, step one. So just as a reminder, a process is a series of steps designed to produce a particular outcome. So for example, maybe we have a process for training and orienting new employees, or we have a process for accepting and integrating new vendors. Those could be examples of processes. So the first step is to define the process that we want to map. And if necessary, then you can also explain the reason for doing so. Most processes grow organically. It's uncommon to actually sit down and map out your process. Next, we define the boundaries of the process. Usually that's the start and the end point. We can make sure we are not mapping an extremely long process. And then finally, we should gather any information we can on that particular process. Okay, and that takes us to step two, which is where we continue collecting information about the process. And this is important because we want to ensure we have a complete picture of the process. So this can include interviewing people that are involved in that process, They are experts or owners of that process. We may also want to review any flowcharts, procedures, or reports that give us more information. These are usually uncommon, but they might be available to your team. And then last, we want to directly observe the process. So we might need several observations to see any variation in the process depending on who is involved. All right, step 3. In this step, we should have enough information to begin identifying the steps. We can break down the process into individual steps, showing what activities take place, what decisions are made, and how information flows. We want to be consistent in our level of detail. So for example, we do not want to be general for one series of steps and then suddenly become very specific for another series of steps. We should be consistent. And then last, all the steps should be in sequential order and make sense. Okay, step 4. Here we define all the roles and responsibilities. At this point, we know the steps and now can explain who does what and when. We identify individuals or teams responsible for each step. As a side note, I recommend not using specific names. Instead, use the title of a position. So for example, instead of saying Matt submits the report, say the director submits the report. Second, we should be clear about roles, responsibilities, and authority. And then one way to do this step is to use what's called a swim lane diagram. This kind of diagram clearly shows each role in a separate horizontal swim lane, almost like you're looking at a pool. We don't want to use the swim lane all the time, but it can be helpful for clearly showing the division of responsibilities. Step 5. Here we identify any inputs or outputs related to the process. So inputs can include materials, information, resources. For example, perhaps our process requires a specific software program or report. And then an output could include a particular product, service, or decision. For example, one process could result in a final decision on hiring an individual. And then finally, we make sure the inputs or outputs are clearly linked to a step. We don't want them to be floating out there around the process map. We want them to actually be connected to a step. All right. By step 6, we should have a finished map, and now we are ready to analyze it. First, we can look for any areas that need improvement. These areas are pretty obvious and may even show up while the map is being constructed. If there are no glaring areas, then we can look a little further to see if there are opportunities for slightly improving efficiency. For example, maybe we see 3 steps that could be combined into one step. Process mapping is usually a visual exercise, but sometimes it's helpful to use actual data. So for example, we could count the number of minutes each step takes and look for trends. I know some colleagues of mine that will take an actual stopwatch and go and count how long a step takes, and then they'll record that in their process map. Okay, in step 7, we document the process map. This can include choosing the right format, like a swim lane diagram, which I talked about before. We could also have a flowchart or a table. We also make sure our language is easy to understand with consistent symbols. Earlier, I showed you that example of a map with different shapes. There are many different symbols and shapes that we can use in our mapping. And then finally, we can make the map visually appealing and easy to understand. Okay, in step 8, we want to validate and share our map. This can include reviewing it with the process owner or manager. The process owner is usually the person who has a day-to-day responsibility over that process, while the manager, the process manager, is usually the one that has the authority or responsibility for that process. So we can review the process map with them, and they can quickly tell us if the map is accurate and complete. And they'll probably tell you right away whether or not it is. We can request feedback on the map from other team members or individuals outside the team. And then finally, we disseminate it to everyone that needs access. We also want to keep a copy on file for future trainings and orientations. A lot of work can go into these maps, so we want to make sure that they don't just walk away. We should keep copies. Okay, here's the last step, step 9. This is where we continue to improve the process. We can review and update it regularly. This is usually done by the process owner and the manager, the process manager as well. We can use it as a tool for future improvement activities. And we can encourage regular feedback from stakeholders. This could be something that could be done on a quarterly basis or on an annual basis, whatever makes the most sense for your team. Okay, and that is the end of the steps. The next step for you is to take a look at the example and the template for process mapping. Thank you for watching.